Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Madcap sent me a note. So Steve, check out the story from WLS out of Chicago, written by Samantha Chapman. Proposed law to crack down on squatting passes the Illinois Senate. And we've talked about this in other states, and this is becoming a movement that I like because up until relatively recently, someone can just find a house that's not occupied or it's vacant for whatever reason, move into it, and in many states, to get them out, you have to go through eviction proceedings as if they're a real tenant. And in some states, that can take some time. And so somebody who owns the house and is like trying to sell it, for instance, has got to go through an eviction process to get somebody out of it who's trespassing. And so a lot of states are now saying, hey, look, let's create a fast track to get people out who are not legitimate tenants. And in fact, here, lawmakers in Illinois have put together a squatter task force to deal with this. So the bill to crack down on squatting is one step closer to becoming law in Illinois. We talked about other states that are doing this too, and like I said, I think it's coming. The proposed law would make it easier for police officers to remove squatters from someone's home, bypassing the months-long eviction process. It was passed in the Senate of Illinois and is heading to the Illinois House for review. It's another major step in the fight to change Illinois law and put an end to squatting, which is an issue the ABC 7i team has been following closely. 2 state lawmakers are teaming up to make the proposed law happen. They're also putting together a squatter task force. The bill proposes to crack down on squatting in Illinois. It's gaining momentum, and homeowners are rejoicing. One said, "Hallelujah, I'm so happy about this." Illinois State Senator for the 5th District is the author of the bill. She believes it'll give property owners in Illinois the protection they need and deserve. It's 1563, the Senate bill. Will give clarity for law enforcement to go in and remove trespassers. Squatters currently have to go through the legal process, which sometimes is long and lengthy, and it's a burden for someone trying to remove them from their property. And I won't point out that long and lengthy are actually very similar, because when someone's speaking just off the cuff, give them a break. The I-Team has been covering complaints about squatters for weeks. Homeowners across the Chicago area have said strangers moved into their property, claim they have rights to be there, and refuse to leave. I remember back in that housing problem that we had back around 2008 or so, where there were a lot of home foreclosures, a lot of people moved out of homes, and so there were a lot of vacant homes just sitting around. And I remember people doing things like going online and finding a blank legal document and filling it out and then just filing it and going, I filed the paperwork. I own the house now. And it's like you can't, quit claim the deed to yourself if you haven't got it, okay? But of course, once that document's accepted for filing, they hold it up when the police show them, go, look, I own the house. I've got a quit claim deed. And I remember seeing a big story on that out of Florida where some guy had done that and they were calling it this legal hack. He had a legal hack where you can get a house for free. No, the guy's squatting. He's filing fake documents. So current law prevents police from removing alleged squatters from homes. Property owners have to handle it through eviction court. So they've got to go to court and file an action to evict somebody. And it doesn't happen overnight. And the weird part is that if someone is otherwise just trespassing, you call the police show up and go, oh, they're trespassing? Okay, you, out of here. So somebody can just come into your home and break into your home and present a false document with no repercussions whatsoever, said a Southside homeowner. One person said this ordeal has been very stressful physically, financially, and mentally. There has got to be a better way for us to not suffer in silence with squatters who are taking over our lives, said a homeowner. Illinois State Representative of the 8th District is now partnering with the other senator I talked about, and will be pushing this bill in the Illinois House. There's a lot of people dealing with squatters in Illinois and across the country, but the fact is, if you've got good journalism that's able to socialize, that brings people together, one person said, and that's why it's more acceptable to pass in Springfield, because people are now realizing it's a big problem, and presumably they mean elsewhere around the state. Those 2 senators strongly believe the bill will pass. In the meantime, they're putting together a squatter task force, bringing landlords, tenants, and real estate professionals together to discuss squatting cases and to come up with solutions and educate the public on how to protect the property. And you might say, Steve, why are they involving tenants? Well, legal tenants do have an interest in this because let's suppose that you had a landlord who decided to kick you out, but you got 6 months left in your lease. They can't just call the police and go, hey, this person's squatting. because you've got a lease. So it's got to have something in there to protect legitimate tenants. And one person said, I'm excited that we're finally doing something now to take the stand. It's a great step in that direction. We need results. That's what we need, results. The bill is aimed at separating tenants who have rights from squatters who would not have rights under the proposed law. A housing rights advocates group told ABC7 they're in favor of the bill, and they're pleased with the language and support it. So the housing rights people actually said this bill passes their standards. That's good. But, I've talked to people. I actually had a recent talk with somebody, and I was talking to somebody who works for a county government, okay? And I was talking to the guy about property. And we were talking about no trespassing signs. And I mentioned something about no trespassing signs. And the guy goes, well, if you don't have any up, then obviously people can come onto your property legally. And I said, what makes you say that? And he goes, well, without a no trespassing sign, it's public property. I go, no, if I own a piece of property, I own the property. And if you come on my property and I tell you to leave, you got to leave. And he goes, oh, yeah, of course. I go, so it's not public property because there's no sign. I said, all the sign does is put someone on notice that they're not allowed to be there. And so let's assume that there's a piece of property, just a piece of property. I own this piece of property. And I don't put no trespassing signs on it for whatever reason. And I walk out there one day and I see somebody walking on my property. I go up and say, excuse me, this is my property. Get off my property. They've now been warned. And if they don't get off my property, I can call the police and go, this is a person trespassing on my property. Now, if I put a no trespassing sign up and they walk past the sign, they've been warned. It's the equivalent of me telling them, get off my property. So when I walk up to them and they've walked past my sign that says no trespassing, private property, keep out, well, guess what? They're trespassing and they've already gotten their warning. The sign is simply the warning. And so I was talking to this guy and I explained that to him. He goes, I guess that makes sense. He goes, but I remember hearing people say that without a sign, it's public property. No, without a sign, you can pretend to believe it was public. But, like if there's a house on it, obviously it's not public property, But getting back to the squatting situation is that most states treated these claims as if it was a landlord-tenant problem. And there are laws to protect tenants in a landlord-tenant setting. So let's suppose I sign a 12-month lease with somebody, and I'm the tenant. They're the landlord. About 6 months into it, for whatever reason, they don't like me anymore. Let's say that I'm doing everything perfectly fine. They just want to raise the rent, but they can't because I've got a lease. But if I moved out, they could re-rent it at a higher rent. So they go to evict me. They want to evict me. And I don't want to leave because I've got a lease. I got a lease. I don't want to go anyplace. I like there. I like being there. And so they go to court and they make up something. They just make up stuff. They go, hey, he's being loud. He's throwing parties. He's damaging the premises. Let's presume they make up lies about me. Okay? Well, obviously, I'm entitled to a hearing on that and let a court decide whether or not I've breached the lease by having loud parties and trashing the unit. And I'm entitled to a hearing on that. And in some states, you're entitled to a jury trial, believe it or not. And so someone who's savvy, that is, they know the system, when they're confronted by a landlord who wants to oust them, goes, no, I'll see you in court. And I'm going to demand a jury trial. And guess what? In some places, that might be 2-3 months down the road. So it's not a fast process, but that's simply because the courts are backed up. And so when they were treating squatters as if they are tenants, then the squatters get a few free months before they can be ousted. And that is a problem. And so there needs to be a fast track situation in the courts where someone who comes along goes, look, I've got squatters and I can prove it. Now you might say, but Steve, how do you prove you're a legitimate tenant then? Well, presumably you've got a lease. Now you might say, but Steve, leases are really easy to fake. Oh yes, they are. They are. We've learned these things. You can find leases on the internet and just fill it out and say, I've got a lease. But of course, do you have any proof of payment? Have you been making monthly payments all along on this lease? Do you have proof of that? And somewhere along the line, their paperwork's going to fall apart. And so I suspect that if you were to put any teeth into a law that said, for instance, if you are squatting someplace and you get busted for it and you drag somebody through the court system to make them oust you in a squatting situation, you got to pay their attorney fees and court costs. For instance, that's one thing. Or another one is they could ask someone to post a bond to prove the righteousness and their belief in the righteousness of their case. And asking someone to post a bond and say, hey, if you lose, you're going to give this bond up. That's another thing you could do. Now, again, I know people are going to say, but Steve, if someone's just getting by paycheck to paycheck and they actually have a legitimate lease, what's to keep the landlord from kicking them out and saying they've got no lease? Well, you've got a lease. You can show it to the judge. Proof of payment, show it to the judge, right? So the law is being worked on right now, but it looks like people on both sides like this, that is even the housing rights people, and they're usually the ones who are scared of these anti-squatter statutes. So I've mentioned before that the pendulum swings both ways. And so it got really, really bad. Like I said, '08, right around there, a lot of empty houses on the market, a lot of people squatting. I remember seeing people on YouTube filming themselves in a house they didn't own and saying, but it's ours now, until somebody comes and kicks them out. So it's a step in the right direction. It's happening in Illinois. WLS reported that Madcap sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Proposed law to crack down on squatting passes the Illinois Senate. It's still got to pass the House, etc. And lawmakers have also formed a squatter task force. Questions or comments? Put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Computers have lots of memory, but no imagination.